Thanks again, everybody, for coming into this session. This is the Invest Yukon Exploration Season Series. This is the first part of a three-part series. Obviously, today's part one. Next week, we'll have part two, and then the week following, the last third part of the series. My name is Trevor Hall. I am the host of the Mining Stock Daily podcast. You can find us on about 12, 13 different networks distributed throughout the world. We deliver a short news briefing every morning, typically about an hour or so before the market opens, highlighting some of the most important news out of the exploration sector each morning that investors and speculators in this space should keep a close eye on, that we believe. We don't cover all of the news because there are many companies, more than 1,500, so there's only so much we can do within 10 minutes. So we do that in the morning. Then we also do some more market commentary and analysis and precious metals, base metals, miners, and also some of the overall market commentary. So you can find us on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, basically wherever you get your podcasts. Would appreciate it if you find us, search for us, hit that subscribe button, and leave us any comments or feedback you would like. So it is my pleasure to welcome three gentlemen who are involved with three different companies based out of the Yukon. Today, we are going to speak with Flow Metals, Granite Creek Copper, and Klondike Gold. Each presenter is going to have just a quick couple minutes to give a brief overview of their company. Then we'll go into a couple questions. Once each company is finished, then we will go into more of a panel discussion regarding specifically those companies and maybe if the audience has questions, they're able to type that in the chat box, and both myself and the moderator will make sure we try to get as many of those answers as we can. So you can type those, but we won't get to those until after the presentations. So we will get into the first presentation. That is with Mr. Jacob Verbas. He is the Vice President of Exploration for Flow Metals. Brand new company, very new company, as in last couple months, brand new company. It's always an exciting time. And so, Jacob, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Trevor. So the Flow Metals was formed when we separated the gold exploration from our copper exploration that was in Go Metals. So this was a spin out in 2018. And since 2018, we had the company private for a couple of years, added gold projects, amongst which our flagship in Yukon. We currently have three projects, one in BC, one in Quebec, and the 60 Mile in Yukon. But we've been working on gold in the Yukon for a while. And, we're a company that grew up in the downturn. And earlier, about 7 years ago, we started working on the Wells property in Yukon. And turned that proved it up and sold it to K2 of the Discovery Group. And this was at the bottom of the market. So that's sort of where we come from, essentially. Currently, we're preparing to get to the 60 Mile area. So it's been, we've only been listed for 2 months. So, of course, the situation this year has somewhat slowed that down. But we're doing some ground geophysics now, getting ready for a small RAB drilling program later in the season. It's a road accessible claim, so it's easy to work. We don't need to rely on helicopters, and we can get in fairly late. And the claim has produced over 150,000 ounces of gold in placer already, which is coarse grain gold. And there is no source that we know of yet there. And so we have, the project has been drilled. Project's been drilled in 2010, 2011, and that was the last serious work that has been done there. And that yielded intercepts of disseminated gold up to 28 grams a ton in fairly narrow veins. And we think that these are zones of disseminated golds that are around coarser grained gold shoots, which we are attempting to find as we speak. That's it for my couple minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jacob. Now we're going to turn it over to Tim Johnson. He's the CEO of Granite Creek Copper. Tim?
Thank you, Trevor. Yeah, so Granite Creek Copper, again, it's a fairly new company. We launched the company in spring of 2019. Company is a member of the Metallic group of companies, which consists of us, Metallic Minerals, and Group 10 Metals. All three companies got their start in the Yukon, and we were added as the sort of the base metal counterpart to the silver play with Metallic and the platinum group with Group 10. So we acquired our Stu project from a very well-known Yukon prospector, Mr. Bill Harris, who had over the years since the 80s been aggregating a land position in the central portion of the Minto Copper Belt. As claims became available, he snapped them up, and he was able to bring a very significant land position to us for our acquisition. So we're adjacent to the Carmax deposit owned by Copper North, and we also have a 30% interest in the in Copper North itself. And that to the north of us is a Minto mine, which is in operation by Capstone, put back into operation last year. So they're currently shipping concentrate. Like I said, we had acquired a significant land position, 115 square kilometers, and shortly after our acquisition, we acquired a historic database that had most of it had never been made public. So we were able to quickly advance targets on our program, just basically doing compilation work. A small field program last year to confirm the tenure of the mineralization. And then this summer, we had crews back in the field going over some historic core that was drilled in the 80s. And when it was drilled, it wasn't sampled completely. It was about 20% of it sampled. They only seemed to sample the real high grade, which is good. But we were missing a lot of the information in our database about structure, alteration, control. So we were able to go back and resample a bulk of that core. We resampled just over 1,400 meters, and that's at the labs now. We also, in going through our data, discovered that, but we suspect that the process being used in the 80s missed a lot of the precious metals. At least that's our hope. So we're going back, we're doing full multi-element ICP analysis and fire assay for gold to see if we can bring their gold numbers into where we think they should be. So yeah, so we basically did a 1,400 meter drill program without turning any steel, and we're pretty pleased with that. And based on the results of that, we'll look at a possible drill program in the fall if we can find a drill, because they're getting to be as rare as hen's teeth in the Yukon right now. Yeah, there's my couple minutes. Thank you, Trevor. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Tim. Now we will turn to Klondike Goals, Mr. Peter Tallman. Peter? Oh, you need to unmute yourself, Peter.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Those two sound good because we have something similar. So Klondike Gold, just as a prelim, we are on the venture exchange under the symbol KG. We trade in Frankfurt under the symbol LBDP and the US OTC under KDKGF. Klondike Gold from 2015 onwards is a restart of a company that was originally incorporated in 1978. From 1980 onwards, it's been focused on the Klondike area. The new management, me, starting in 2015, took this project on because in 2015, the property had produced from surface 20 million ounces of gold in placer from within the claims that we currently own. With no known source. So that was, at the time, the largest unexplained gold geochemical anomaly on the planet. Since that time, we've done systematic regional or district scale exploration over our, I should mention, 600 square kilometer property that covers the entirety of that area that produced the 20 million ounces. Have done 35,000 meters of drilling and have located two major sources of gold in bedrock We can explain why the gold is in Bonanza Creek, which is the most famous placer creek in Klondike, and also where it came from to source the El Dorado Creek placers, which is the second most. So Bonanza Creek has produced 3 million ounces in itself historically. It's only like 3 kilometers long. El Dorado has produced 4 million ounces. We are exploring the bedrock sources of those. For the first time, though, this year, we've transitioned from exploration and discovery into mineral resource delineation. What we see are multi-million ounce targets. We have 2 of them. The Lone Star Zone is 3 kilometers long in outcrop and drill hole. And we've been doing this year delineation drilling to establish open pittable resources. And a kilometer away in parallel is the Standard Zone. That's high-grade nuggety quartz veining, also 3 kilometers long in outcrop and drill hole. And we did a small test there also for open pittable resources. The results of the Lone Star tests are just out. They were positive. They gave a really nice open pit configuration with grades consistent with what we've drilled, disseminated, as the 2 previous speakers mentioned. And we're still waiting for results from the Standard Zone, which should be out in a week or so. And so what we see here is world-class potential. We're aiming now, from now going forward, at establishing a minimum 2 million ounce gold resource. Drilling is underway. It's going to take a little while to do the 2 million ounces. We figure we need another 50,000 meters of drilling to do that. But hopefully within 2 years or so, we get a resource with a PEA. And I'll mention that we are directly outside of Dawson on roads, airports. Power is 20 kilometers away. All the roads are government maintained. And so the infrastructure advantage is enormous from an economic point of view. Back to you, Trevor.
Okay. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We're going to have a panel discussion. And Peter, actually, I want to hit it back to you because your location really is at the heart of where the historic Klondike Gold Rush took place in the late 1800s. It's not just happening in the Yukon. It's happening in Nevada. It's happening in Idaho and in certain parts of the United States, and also in other parts, in Canada as well. And that's really going in and exploring some of these historical workings. With your project and with your company, can you kind of walk us through how do you go into doing deeper exploration with some of these places that were historically mined for decades and decades, and using modern exploration techniques and strategies?
Well, when we took it on, actually, the evaluation before we took it on was realizing that effectively the exploration that had been conducted from 1896 into the 2000s was really ineffective. And so the premise was modern exploration with modern techniques is required. There isn't much outcrop in the Klondike, in the Yukon in general. And so really we're exploring with a drill, but we do ICP, we do the advanced ICP suite. We do oriented core drilling. We do metallic screen because all our gold is coarse, 90% gravity gold recoverable. It's all greater than a millimeter, so you can see it. That's no surprise. 20 million ounces of gold on surface has been recovered from gravity. And so we've had structural geologists in, spent a fortune there a couple of years ago, looking at where the structures are. So we've been able to map structures that were never ever identified. And these are deep crustal features that are the plumbing system for an orogenic gold network. All of that is kind of the background science. And then looking at how those relate to where the placers are. And they relate directly. What we discovered was the original, before I got there, the prevailing theory was the gold was eroded from somewhere, but there was no gold remaining in the bedrock. And that was actually, we've shown that to be nonsense. I figured it was anyway. But from a science point of view, the gold is directly uphill of where they were finding it. And then there's a structural Our structure in the Klondike fits the Tintina Gold Belt directly. We believe all the ages of mineralization also fit. Prior to 2015, they didn't. Now I think they do. And that kind of places the Klondike with 20 million ounces in a world-class category in a world-class district. And I think broadly, the Yukon is absolutely unexplored, particularly for orogenic gold deposits. And everybody has a shot. And these other two companies, by description, I think they're on the same thing we are.
I did forget to mention prior to this, there will be some forward-looking statements. So let's get that out.
I might say a few. I kind of do usually.
and just like the big rush in 1885, everybody's got a shot, right? If you're going into the Yukon, Peter.
Yeah. Well, and I will pay, because your background is California, and this applies here too. California geology is the same as ours. The California mother lode placer was a white channel gravel. There was 40 million ounces of placer produced from that, and ultimately over 200 million ounces of bedrock gold. So, and that's all directly uphill and related to the placer. So it's not just here, it's everywhere.
Okay. So moving away from some of the historical aspects of exploration in Yukon, let's turn it over to you, Jacob. Flow's only been on the market for 2 months. So this is a brand. This might be the Yukon's newest play. I don't know if there's another one out there in the last couple of weeks, but Flow might be the newest. What are some of the challenges as a new company putting a project out there and hitting the market?
Well, the challenges, of course, for a company that is as fresh as we are that, and we listed 2 months ago, and of course that's the exploration season in the Yukon. It's the best months are June, July, August, but of course after a listing comes a financing to increase the working capital for exploration, and after that the big programs can start. So that's essentially one of the challenges of a new company. That being said, though, even with the working capital that we listed with, we had set aside a portion for ground geophysics and RAP drilling, and so that's going to happen. We will extend that if we can, and again, it's, it kind of depends on how quickly the weather turns in Yukon. You can never quite know after September rolls around, but we will likely we'll likely have some time. That all said, we're not a totally new company in that, of course, we have been working our projects for the past couple of years, and the new Brenda project in BC we've had since before I was involved with the company. We've had that for 4 or 5 years, I believe, and so. There's been a lot of work that's gone into the historical databases. The project was last worked in 2010, 2011, and then dropped to look for greener pastures, without really working through that historical database of drilling and of soils, geophysics, etc. So we are left with a trove of historical data that we can use. So yes, I guess that's where we're at. We're a new company on the stock exchange, but in other ways we're a little bit older than that.
Okay. Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you. You mentioned Mr. Bill Harris.
Yes.
If anybody ever wants to talk anything about the Yukon with probably the most knowledgeable guy about the Yukon, Bill Harris is probably it. And once you meet him, you'll never forget him.
That's absolutely true. And the danger is you get him going, and eventually you got to wander off and have dinner while he still goes. But yeah, an absolutely trove of information, and you're getting him on the property, and he points out stuff all the way back to the 80s that some of that information's lost. So it's pretty neat.
And I can't remember. I think you mentioned it in your intro, but I want to kind of bring up this resampling program with Granite Creek. It sounds like that just finished up, or can you kind of walk us through why the resampling and what kind of benefits it's going to provide you?
Oh yeah, so the field portion of it just finished. So the crew mobbed out just last week, and samples have been delivered to the lab. We're uncertain what turnarounds are like these days, because I know the labs all of a sudden are getting swamped. So we'll see what the timeline on that was. But the rationale, when we got a hold of our data and we started to go through it, we started to model it to see if the historic drilling would hold up in a resource. We just found gaps in the information. So we didn't have the full multi-element analysis. So, we didn't have indicator minerals. We didn't know much about the alteration. And we also suspect that the lab that was being done work in the 80s, which was an in-house lab, had a very high cutoff for gold. So a lot of the gold that we think is there wouldn't have been detected. So in a news release we put out, you'll see on the table there's a lot of trace as you go down the table. And our hope is that we can turn those traces into real numbers and use those numbers to inform what we need to do next to get to a 43101 compliant resource. So that was the rationale, is using modern methods to bring our understanding of the controls of the mineralization to a point where we're comfortable going and drilling, because we could have just put a drill on the property and just start poking holes, but there's a lot of work that we were able to do for very cost effective before we get to that stage.
What about the synergies between your Stu project and the adjacent Carmax deposit? What are you seeing there?
Well, yeah, that was the rationale for us acquiring a 30% interest in Copper North. There has been, that's been a well-known deposit. It goes back all the way back to when Western Copper had it. There is a small oxide resource there. But what we recognized is that they had kind of run out of room to grow that oxide resource on the land package that they had. We have a significantly larger land package, and in fact, at one point, some of the ground that we have was held by that same company. And of course, when it was lapsed, Mr. Bill Harris was Johnny on the spot and was able to acquire it and help us out. So what we see potential synergies is a small resource that is at PEA stage to the south of us, combined with the blue sky that we can provide. We start to make a pretty compelling story. We are talking with the Copper North board. We don't know what that combining of those two assets would look like in the future, but we think long term that's probably going to happen, whether it's us or somebody else comes in and snaps both of us up. Our philosophy when we acquired the project was acquire what we considered to be a brownfield project in a district that had an operating mine in it. So it gives us three possible exit strategies, right? We find something modest, we can just hand it over the fence to that operating mine. We find something larger and we become a takeover target. We find something larger still and combine with our neighbors to the south, we attract a big player to the belt. And that's our goal, is to attract one of the major copper producers and show that the Minto Copper Belt has, multi-billion pound potential. And we think we can get there fairly quickly.
Okay. Just a reminder for people in the audience, there is a Q&A chat. If you do have a question for the group or a specific individual, please hit that, type that question in the chat, and we will try to get to it as soon as we can. Before we get to some of those questions, this is. I feel like I ask this question a lot to anybody who's operating in the Yukon, but it's an important question. The Victoria mine has come online, is obviously in commercial production, which was really big news for the Yukon. Peter's excited. It looks like Alexco's Keno Hill is going to be in production here within months, weeks, which is also exciting. So it really seems like things are progressing really well. However, the Yukon's not without its challenges. What would you like to see, or what needs to happen to to really make the Yukon kind of the primo mineral exploration and production jurisdiction in North America? First one who wants to take it? Maybe Peter, because you looked really excited.
Well, I'm funny you should ask that, because I met recently with Sandy Silver as the Premier of Yukon, and 2 days after that, coincidentally, with Curry Dixon, who's the leader of the opposition. And that's exactly what the topic of conversation was for the hour and a half I talked to both of them about. Some of it is government. My perspective is government regulation, it's not the government. The government's policies are some of the best and most, or it's the best jurisdiction, one of the best jurisdictions in the world to operate in. It's supported by the government, and I think both parties would pursue the same policies. But on the ground, there's a lot of ways to improve the process, particularly for permits, and particularly in how the government, the First Nations, and the companies interact. And that has been, the Yukon, to give them their due, invented the way that all three parties could participate. There are definitely challenges with that. And I think going forward that there's a lot of room for improvement on it. However, there actually is that regulatory process is already the best roadmap in Canada. So it's criticism of something that's working, but I think it can work better. And that would make this jurisdiction, it would remove some of the uncertainty. There is no uncertainty on, you can go and develop stuff and turn it into a mine. There's already, Victoria Gold just did that. Alexco is about to, and operate. There are historic mines too, but the process and timeline can get better. And I think that's what would help enormously.
Yeah, I can pitch in on that too. I think from our perspective, what's lacking and what could potentially be a significant bottleneck as we move into what looks like a serious bull market in precious metals is just capacity of the various government agencies to handle the number of exploration and funding that's coming to the Yukon. I think that could be problematic. It's minorly problematic now. Turnaround on permit applications, and it's a staffing and capacity issue for the various agencies. I think is probably what's going to be, this could be a problem moving forward.
Jacob, Peter, and Tim have been involved in the Yukon for a good amount. You're relatively new. I mean, you're a younger geo and exploration in the Yukon, and have you become quite jaded at all?
Well, when I moved to Canada in 2012, I started working in the Yukon myself on my PhD, so I'm pretty familiar with the Yukon and its geology. We've also got our claim, our Go Metals claim in Yukon, which is the flagship in that company, which we've worked on for several years. And so it's I love the Yukon. I love it for the potential to host a variety of deposits, not only gold. And I think with us, we do have projects in other provinces, and I do think as both Peter and Tim mentioned, that the process in Yukon for engaging with the different stakeholders is the better one of those provinces. But at the same time, of course, it's important for us to always realize that they're behind the forms and the online applications and all that, there are people, and we need to be able to talk to each other and keep each other posted on what we want to do on our claims, right? Because that's in the end where its communication is key there. And even though the government has streamlined the applications with their for the class 1 to 3 notifications, those are online things that it's important to also discuss these things in person or over the phone. And so we've noticed that when we worked on the wells with the White River First Nation, which we had no problems there.
It does seem like it continues to attract younger up and coming geologists who will one day potentially become, CEOs of companies. I mean, Jacob, you're doing great work. I mean, I keep on thinking about the work Julia was doing with ATAC last year. I mean, but it just keeps attracting really incredible young talent. What is it about the Yukon that is so attractive for a young geo?
That's a good question. I think it's potential. For me, as a grad student, it was the potential to find something new. Where in Yukon you can turn over a rock and find a new rock unit, and write it and write an article about it. Whereas in southern BC, that's harder. In Europe, where I'm from, you can't find any rock that 15 geologists haven't yet looked at. So that's, for me, that was the exciting part. There are large parts of Yukon that are underexplored. There are parts where we don't have government maps available at even 1 to 50,000 scale. And so there's huge potential there. And I think that's the excitement for sure.
Trevor, if you don't mind, just as a case in point, in the Klondike 1896 gold discovery up until 2015, there was never a geology map of the district, ever. We did it first. And that is, I think, a matter of shame. The Canadian geologists who pride themselves on, global reach and everything else, you got to be kidding me. There's no geology map here. Anyway, so it's done, and I agree with what Jacob's saying.
Let's turn it. Let's go to this Q&A. We have some questions from the audience that we need to make sure we try to answer as much as we can. The first question is for you, Peter. You mentioned that the gold is coarse and greater than 1 millimeter. Do they occur in thin veinlets, or such as stockwork zones, or in thick and distinct veins?
Both. So our Lone Star zone is our major target. That's a deep crustal thrust that's been mineralized post-thrusting, and the gold occurs as discrete grains, effectively disseminated, but technically they're on minor foliation fractures, as well as the minority of it occur in stringer veins. The unit is 60 to 100 meters wide, and it's pretty much consistently mineralized. The next one down, the Stander zone, is quartz veining. That's the source of the white channel gravel, and that's quartz veins in a brittle unit, and you get coarse clots of gold up to massive seams of gold, so stupidly high-grade mineralization. So pick it.
I know, Tim, you answered this question in the chat, but we might as well just quickly answer it out loud. Ken asks, if you're looking at diamond drilling in the fall, or would you consider a RAB program?
Well, a lot of it depends on the information that we get back from our current sampling program. I mean, we've relogged the core, and if we're satisfied that that gives us enough of the structural information, then we would look probably at a reverse circ versus diamond. The RAB, yeah, we've considered RAB for sort of more of an exploration focus on some of our outlying targets from our A zone, as a very cost-effective way of looking at it. So I think Ken mentioned to me earlier that he'd picked up a RAB drill or something. So maybe he can get a hold of me offline and we can discuss that.
Another question that came in was about labor and material shortages. If there's a problem, and how is it being resolved?
I think there is a labor issue right now in the Yukon, and from a geological standpoint, we're bringing geologists out of the territory from BC. You're very careful with COVID restrictions on when people can come in and what the isolation plan is. But yeah, I think from sort of it was odd because about 2-3 months ago we were trying to figure out if we were going to do any exploration at all in the Yukon. Markets were looking rough. COVID was in, and then it's like someone turned a switch, and all of a sudden everybody's in the field all at once. And it has been a struggle to find crews, and I think it's only going to get more interesting as we move through 2020 and into 2021 with. Like I said before, if we're in the bowl that everybody thinks we're in, anybody that wants to work is going to be able to.
How about work with the First Nations and any support and maybe training or getting First Nations involved with the companies? Maybe Jacob or Peter, if you want to take one of those.
Yeah. So what we've always tried to do, we're a lean company, and so we don't we always work with contractors, and we always try to look for companies run by First Nations first or part First Nations. So we're that's where we look initially, and there's definitely a potential for us to start working more directly with them down the line. Our exploration program 2020 will likely be too small to do that, but in 2021, certainly I think there's a possibility to directly hire the people from First Nations. Yeah.
Peter?
Well, for us, because we're in Dawson, we've had a program since I started of hiring all the Dawson kids. Basically, everyone else is employed, but we've been hiring the 15 and 16-year-olds every year. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we've now trained a cadre of what I tell the chief is that we're training your mining department for 5 to 10 years from now. These kids, the first ones have now all gone to university. I'd say 3/4 of them are First Nation. And they're all coming back in the summer. They get great, they tend to work, the ones coming back, like they work for 2 or 3 weeks and make a pile of money. And then go off and get ready for the next semester. And so it's been really successful that way. We're part of the community. I might add that we were the first to drill in the Yukon this year. And this year is anomalous for us is that because of the COVID restrictions, we don't want to have contact with Dawson. And so we entirely restricted it, put everyone in quarantine, even if they were not even from the territory, but no contact with Dawson because it's a First Nation territory. We spread infection into that, then the elders are at risk, and that's the last thing we wanted to do. So there's a bunch of different aspects on dealing with training and being involved with the Yukon First Nations.
There's a question from Andrew asking about shortages and limitations with labs doing some of their technical work. Can you tell us about that, Peter?
I'll just give you the word. We should have had results 3 weeks ago. We were the first to drill, first to finish drilling. We released our drill crews to others. We're about to restart, so I don't have any issue with getting drills because they're already in the property and the drillers are coming back. But we're waiting on results. And all of our results should have been in 3 weeks ago, and I'm still waiting. I think there's another week to go. So they're 30 days beyond their timeline for us. And I'm told that's a national thing.
Yeah, that's what we're hearing too, is that about roughly a 4-week delay, which, when things are busy, that's just what you expect. That's what the industry looks at. You're not getting assays on a 2-week turnaround like you were last year.
Before we go, any last words of wisdom you'd like everybody to know before we say adieu?
Buy Klondike Gold. Okay, it's silent. Buy Klondike Gold.
Thank you.
Can I quote Bill Harris on Granite Creek stock? This is a very forward-looking statement. Bill Harris will say, "Buy often and don't be afraid to chase it."
Yeah, sometimes you gotta listen to Bill. Sometimes you shouldn't. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it. The second series of this will be back next week, I believe at the exact same time, next Thursday. So you can register for that. We will have 3 new companies. Feel free to reach out to these 3 gentlemen with any follow-up questions you might have after we close up shop here. You can go to their websites. You can find their emails. Reach out to them. I'm sure they'll be happy to talk to you. Again, thank you so much, Jacob, Peter, Tim. Have yourselves a great rest of the week. Enjoy these markets and this bull market that we're in. And I agree with you. It's quite exciting. So we've been waiting a long time for this.
Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have yourself a great day.